Welcome to Notepad. My name is Ibrahim Sani. We're going to have two interviews in this particular episode. First, we're going to talk about the possibility of an interesting conversation when it comes to the private equity deal rising. This is coming from the Bain & Co. report. And later on, after the break, we'll be speaking with the Selangor Maritime Gateway people, understand Lumayan, about the cleanup of the Klang River. But first, let's go to Singapore as we have Andrea Campagnoli on the line with us to talk about the report that Bain & Co. has publicly issued very recently. They say that the Asia-Pacific private equity deal value has hit a record high despite global COVID-19 disruptions, and this has enabled us to have a very robust conversation into why and where is the investors coming in and thinking of right now. So Andrea, thanks for joining us on the line right now. Andrea, of course, is the partner in Bain & Company's private equity practice. Andrea, let's jump into the first conversation, into the methodology of the report per se. How did you guys come up with the report? What kind of measurements and the kind of matrices that you guys used in arriving at this conclusion of this report, particularly when it comes to the world of PE?
Yes, absolutely. This is a report that we publish every year. We have done so for the last 10 years. And we publish both an APAC report and also a global report for the worldwide PE activity. There is two main sources for the report. One is we interview and survey more than 160 GPs, so the investors behind the private equity funds. And we also draw on our experience of advising hundreds of transactions every year.
Right. Having said that, what would be some of the key findings that you can share with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the year has been a tale of two halves. As we all know, the lockdowns in the first half of the year impacted business and financial activity, and effectively deal making completely halted. However, the second half more than compensated for that, and the year overall for the region, we were up more than 20% versus the previous year. That also brought the total participation of Asia Pacific in the global PE industry to a much higher level than previous years. So around 28% of all PE activity is now in APAC, up from 25% the previous year. So the region is gaining more and more importance globally. And finally, the last really positive trend is that we saw growth in some of the largest PE markets in Asia Pacific, specifically India and China, and those are very important to propel the entire region. However, we don't want to gloss over some of the more negative findings. And the reality is that because of coronavirus, a lot of corporate buyers, they are typically acquiring portfolio companies of PE firms, halted that activity because they were themselves disrupted by the COVID situation. That means that exits fell, and they fell at around 35% versus last year. And that had a domino effect on the second trend that we would put on this side of the page, which is that fundraising also was particularly down versus the previous year. The reason why fundraising was down is, as I said, due to the exit. If LPs are not receiving the profits from the exits, they're not then putting back money into PE as an asset class, and therefore fundraising went down. The last thing I want to say is that we continue to see, as previous years, that the digital businesses are those that GPs are backing the most, especially within two verticals were particularly subject to positive tailwinds during COVID. One, obviously e-commerce, and within e-commerce, especially groceries as a category. And the second one is online education. In both, we saw a number of mega deals, and together they propelled the higher deal activity so far registered in Asia Pacific.
It's interesting that you mentioned this. I just want to know more about what's driving the growth for last year. the kind of items that general partners think about most often for last year. We all know healthcare is going to be a big thing for last year. It turns out that healthcare was the only thing that needs to be talked about last year. So what would be the driving factors for last year? And at the same time, what would be some of the expectations for this year, the kind of things that we can think about when it comes to the PE space for growth and sustainable growth at that for this year?
Very difficult to have an exact forecast, but one of the potential scenarios for 2021 is that this momentum actually does continue. One of the reasons for that is I've mentioned that corporate buyers disappeared, but on the other side, the IPO route and the SPAC route really opened up at the end of 2020, and we see also very, very strong momentum in the first quarter of 2021. We think that will continue to the end of the year. Again, digital sectors, technology, and so forth, likely being the number one in terms of activity.
So what would be some of the GP's top concerns right now?
Absolutely. The GP's top concerns start with high valuation. So deal making was up, but also the average multiple, so how much a PE fund had to pay to acquire an asset, was also up from previous years, which was also up from the year before. So you see a continued trend going upwards. That part of it is driven by the fact that technology is becoming a larger part of the portfolio, and technology assets are typically more expensive. But also, if you were to do a like-for-like comparison, all the sectors are trending up. That worries GPs as they need to take pretty bullish assumptions on where those multiples will go to approve the deal nowadays. When it comes to institutional investors or the LPs, we mentioned it earlier, their biggest concern is around the drop in exits and the ability to make up for that drop will drive how much capital they can invest in Asia Pacific PE going forward.
So what would be some of the general concerns for GPs, maybe even institutional investors, other type of investors? What are the top of mind that they are thinking about right now?
Absolutely. So the two behemoths are China and India. And the good news for the region is that they were both up substantially in activity. China was up 40% from around 70 billion to almost 100 billion. And India was up 12% from around 30 billion to 35 billion. The other regions, specifically the ones included in the report being Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Southeast Asia, and Japan, had a little bit more mixed results. So Australia and South Korea increased somewhat, but Southeast Asia and Japan were flat to declining. Within Southeast Asia, the one country to note would be Indonesia, that saw a considerably higher activity, especially linked to some of the large company in the tech sector.
All right, I have a follow-up question there. Do you think that Indonesia will continue to attract some more investment, at least in the near term?
We believe that Indonesia will continue to have momentum when it comes to technology. And yes, we have seen historically an increasing amount of fund, both in VC and PE, being deployed in the countries. One scenario would include that momentum continues, where IPOs and SPAC become even more prominent from classic buyout.
Yeah, there are some that argue that Southeast Asia is having some difficulties in terms of raising funds for various reasons, of course. Is there any truth in this?
So the data shows two things, that in aggregate funds in Asia Pacific raised less money than previous years. And the second is that small funds struggle to raise versus large established branded funds. When I say struggle to raise, it means that they typically took longer and perhaps raised slightly below the initial target fundraise. We believe that holds for Southeast Asia also, beyond holding for Asia Pacific as a whole.
Do you think that there would be some industries that are more attractive in the PE space or less attractive Do you feel that there are new growth areas that one haven't thought of yet and perhaps might have to think about very soon when it comes to this?
Yeah. First thing I would say is that generally, almost all industries are attractive for private equity, especially in this region where the penetration of private equities is relatively low. In terms of new growth areas, because of some of the headwinds and tailwinds, depending on the sector created by COVID, we think that definitely e-commerce and online education are two of the principal vectors. And we suspect that the momentum they've shown at the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021 will continue for the rest of the years and for the years to come.
Very interesting, very interesting. I want to ask you a little bit more about Malaysia. What are your general thoughts on Malaysia when it comes to the PE space?
Yeah, Malaysia continues to be in the consideration set for Southeast Asia, given the relevance of its economies. And there is substantial white space in terms of penetration of private equity as an asset class. So we believe that we'll continue to see activity in the country.
Right. Thank you, Andrea. That was Andrea Campagnoli, the partner at Bain & Company's private equity practice, making the phone call with us in Singapore. We'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll talk to Syaiful Azmin Nordin of Landasan Lumayan, Senang Berhad, regarding the waters of Selangor. We'll be right back after these messages. You are watching Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. Today we shall focus a little bit more on the state of Selangor, but not just that. We are talking about the resident of Klang Valley altogether. This is because Klang River has been classified as Class 5 on the Water Quality Index, and trying to see what that means for individuals like you and me. And of course, what does that mean for the industries of Malaysia as well? Joining me is Landasan Lumayan MD, Encik Syaiful Azmin Nordin. Syaiful and I have been talking since last year, but this is the first time we're meeting face to face. So Syaiful, thanks for taking the time to speak with us. Welcome to our new home.
Thank you, Ibrahim.
Let's talk a little bit about the connection between SMG, also the Selangor Maritime Gateway, with Landasan Lumayan, with the state government of Selangor. How does this all interplay together?
Thank you, Ibrahim. First of all, thank you, Astro, AWANI, for inviting me again to talk about the Klang River. As I mentioned in our previous conversation, Selangor State Government put a great emphasis on the Klang River because it is a very strategic asset to the Selangor State Government. 2018, State approved a new project to rehabilitate and redevelop Klang River, which is called Selangor Maritime Gateway. In terms of governance, this project is being so-called administered or being given proper advice by a committee at the state level, which is called SMG Consultative Council, chaired by one of the EXCO, and then the members are all from agencies, state agencies. They are giving advice in terms of technical and policy matters, in terms of how we want to coordinate all the integral agencies in Selangor, focusing on river. Then we have Landasan Lumayan. We are subsidiary of MBI, 100% owned by MBI, that being tasked to implement all the initiative with regard to cleaning and rehabilitation of the Klang River.
Okay, which is important because the whole purpose of this conversation will be focusing a little bit more on that, which is cleaning and rehabilitation on the river, using Sungai Klang as a source for renewable water, renewable source. Is there a benchmark for us to look at, like how much needs to be done, how much we are at right now, that kind of stuff?
The Klang River previously, as you mentioned, it was Class 5. Class 5 is very polluted. Then slowly we resolve in terms of the solid waste issues at the Klang River. After a few years, after extracting about 67,000 metric ton of waste, we install a water quality monitoring sensors along the Klang River. We have seen a positive impact towards improvement of the water quality. Some part of it, we managed to achieve class 2, class 3, especially at the downstream area because of the dilution effect, minimal discharge to the Klang River. But generally, now Klang River is still at class 3 and class 4, even though there is a slight improvement from class 5 before we've done our cleaning job, but now at least shows some improvement to the water quality. Our target is that Klang River at least consistently at class 3 at all time.
What kind of investment are we talking about now?
We are talking about number
Let's
one.
say blue sky strategy. I want to be class 1.
Okay. Number one, we need to beef up the river infrastructure. We need to do dredging and desiltation to remove sedimentation that has been accumulated at the Klang River throughout the years. Then we need to do infrastructure to redirect all the pollution source from the industry, from the residential, from directly contributing or discharging directly to the Klang River. Then we need to treat the water. So basically, what I'm saying is that if we want to improve the Klang River, we need to tackle the root cause of the problem, which is the quality of the raw water. Now the raw water, like you mentioned earlier, class 5, and then improve to class 3. So we have to do a lot of things to improve the quality of the raw water.
I don't know much about your industry, and that is something that I'm not proud of. Perhaps this is something that we need to think about all the time. But clearly there's some governance issue as well in terms of state versus federal when it comes to water, right?
Yeah.
Does it complicate things in your line of work?
River is under the state jurisdiction. River is under the state jurisdiction. Of course, at the federal level, they can come in, they can introduce a policy, they can do a nationwide program. But in terms of administration and governance, state river fall under jurisdiction of the state, including the land along the Klang River. It's under the state.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the visibility of people's awareness or consciousness when it comes to Selangor River, SMG. The ocean cleanup vessel called Interceptor was well publicized. A lot of Malaysians know that. My wife knows it quite interestingly enough. I think it's because it's a fun thing to think about, right?
Yeah.
How has that helped in your efforts of making the Klang River a little bit more viable?
Okay. Let us start with what we have done when we do a cleaning job. That time, the awareness among the public quite low, because they don't foresee that how important is the river. Then we do a cleaning job. Then when we have a water disruption issues, generally people knows that 90% of our treated water comes from river. Then we engage people, we engage public, we engage school students. In fact, you're talking about Coldplay, our existing Interceptor.
Yeah, okay, so people who don't know that, Coldplay, the famous band Coldplay is coming to sing maybe, and perhaps talk about the second Interceptor launch as well.
Yeah.
So how does that interrelate with what you guys are doing?
So basically, when in terms of awareness and campaign, we don't undermine the participation from the local agencies and local partners. Our 002 Interceptor was funded by Westport.
Okay.
But public don't get, there's no reaction from the public at that point of time.
Yeah. When you say Westport, this is Ruben Gnanalingam's
Dato'
outfit.
Ruben, yes,
Okay.
Dato' Ruben.
Right.
He sponsored 002.
Okay.
So, but when Coldplay sponsors 005, then suddenly public react. So it shows that we must have like an icon for this river cleaning program. Then we can attract more people to participate and increase their awareness in terms of river rehabilitation.
That's fine, right? We've always had celebrity touches
yeah,
here
that's
and
fine.
there.
Yeah.
All right. Is this the optimal way of managing water?
Okay, before we talk about the water treatment and distribution, let us understand the full cycle of treatment and distribution.
Yeah, please, go ahead, share.
We abstract water from river. In Selangor, 90% of our water comes from river. Then we do treatment and distribute to industrial or residential use. So the problem now, our raw water quality, we have to tackle the root of the problem. So when our job here, SMG job, is to tackle the root of the problem.
So what is the root of the problem?
We want to improve the raw water quality.
Okay.
So in order to improve the raw water quality, as I mentioned earlier, number one, we have to clear all the waste floatables. Then we improve the water quality a bit. But then it does not stop there. We have to go a bit more further. See, what about the discharge from the industry? That one we have to tackle as well.
So you're talking about factories and stuff?
Factories, some of residential area, villages and all that, they directly discharge to the river. So now we have promoting the idea of zero discharge policy at the state level. So this zero discharge policy is whereby industry buy water from the water operator and they move into the water recycling program so that they can minimize the discharge to the river, so that we can maintain the water quality. Then we can enhance the water quality. Sorry. By enhancing the water quality, if we want to do treatment, further treatment to distribute the water, it gives a lot of benefit to the water operator. Number one, the cost of treatment will be lower. Number two, prolong the useful life of our treatment plant. And also we can, number three, at the state level, we can rejuvenate the riverbank. People will come to the riverbank. The land value along the river will be enhanced. So that's what we are doing now, tackling the root cause of the problem. Number one, we clean, remove the waste. Number two, we do awareness and campaign, including the interceptor by collaborating with the ocean cleanup and now coal play. And number three, we are promoting the idea of zero discharge policy at the state level. And we hope that the state will buy our idea to implement zero discharge policy.
Because you're an outfit of MBI, isn't this a done deal between the collaboration between you and the state government?
No, I think we have to engage many people. We have various stakeholders to engage, not only agencies, state government, but also the industrial player, and also the residential areas along the Klang River. So they must come together with us, appreciate our ideas, and support us in terms of implementing the zero discharge policy.
So it says that 90% of the Selangor water consumption is from rivers, and this water is being extracted. And both extraction and, of course, treatment are cost that is going to be shouldered mostly by the state, and it's not funneled back to or distributed back to the customers, right? This kind of cost?
No. So far, the state government has invested 45 million.
Is that a lot, or?
It's, well,
for a drop in the river, so to speak.
56 kilometer, 45 million is justifiable, justified investment. It's considered a reasonable investment made by the state government to beef up the river infrastructure.
But how much would you have spent, assuming that you're a billionaire here? And
I would say more than 1 billion.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Right?
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's not a lot when it comes to river management.
Yeah, but as I said earlier, if we can tackle the root cause of the problem,
which is the river cleanup.
The river cleanup, improvement of the raw water quality, we can manage the amount of investment for the treatment and distribution. That's why we are here.
Yeah.
To tackle the root cause of the problem.
But let's talk a little bit more about your solution here. It seems like it's clear that you want to clean up the river. And of course, Selangor is using what you call a two-pronged approach. Here you say that this is to ensure the protection of the river by rehabilitating the water, to create awareness on your policies, and you say that the Selangor state government is adopting this two-pronged approach. And here, Landasan Lumayan in particular, the company that you're leading right now, is treating the treatment of the water as well. There has to be some issues that needs to be discussed. One of them is, of course, the pollution that is being created. Doesn't matter how much you clean up, if the pollution is continuously being created, your job is never done.
Yeah.
What's your message on this one?
My message is simple. When there is a water disruption, when there is a pollution issues at the Klang River, the first public reaction is that where is the enforcement agency? Where is the enforcement agency? That is the ongoing message that we've gotten from the public.
It's a fair request, right?
It's a fair request, but we must not forget, why don't we do self-enforcement? Why should we move into self-enforcement? Why should we wait for the enforcement agency to do the enforcement, especially for the industry and for residential? Why do, at the first place, enforce ourselves not to pollute the river? We are buying treated water, but we are discharging a very polluted water into the river. It will not solve a problem.
That was our conversation with Syaiful of Layanan Selamayan. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to astroawani.com. Look for those kind of interviews there. And of course, there are plenty of things that needs to be discussed when it comes to the water issue of Selangor and also the nation. Find out more on how you can contribute on our website at astroawani.com. Till then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.